What would you do if a stranger stared at you and decided you didn't belong in first class? That sharp judgment, that unspoken verdict, hung in the air at Miami International Airport. Monica Harper adjusted the strap of her leather tote and looked up from the boarding line, noticing the way the man at the check-in counter hesitated for a heartbeat too long before handing her boarding pass back. Her pulse didn't quicken. She had felt this before, a lifetime of eyes that measured her worth by appearance, by assumptions, by skin. The smell of polished marble mixed with coffee and the faint tang of jet fuel filled the hall, but she barely noticed. She was focused, observing. The gate agent's hand shook slightly as he processed her documents. Monica's gaze swept the terminal. She could see a mother hustling her children, a businessman on the phone, a young couple whispering, unaware that a storm was about to ignite in the first-class cabin of Flight Harper 722 to Los Angeles. She stepped onto the jet bridge, feeling the subtle hum of the plane beneath her feet, the vibrations crawling up through the metal grating. The door slid open to reveal the soft glow of cabin lighting, cream leather and brushed bronze stretching in precise lines ahead. She inhaled, the scent of new leather and warm towels soothing a fraction of the tension in her chest. Her target was clear. Observe the crew, test the culture, but remain invisible until the moment of truth. She moved down the aisle, her steps deliberate, measured, silent, but commanding in presence. Eyes flicked toward her, a flicker of surprise, a questioning glance she ignored. She was a ghost in plain sight, her simple teal hoodie and black trousers whispering wealth without shouting it, her sneakers muted against the carpet, her hair pulled into a tidy bun. No one knew who she really was, yet, and that was the point. The cabin was nearly full when she reached seat 1A. It should have been hers. The attendant, a young woman named Claire Benson, greeted a passenger in the adjacent seat, smiling politely but stiffly, offering champagne and guidance. Monica paused, just short of the seat, taking in the man seated there. Older, silver hair, tailored suit, his posture a mix of entitlement and comfort, his hands resting lightly on the armrests as if claiming dominion. He looked up at Monica, and for a fraction of a second, his eyes flickered with confusion. She said nothing, simply held up her boarding pass. He didn't read it. He assumed. His smirk was subtle, condescending. "You know, usually this seat is for passengers who fly this route all the time," he said, voice low but sharp, laced with judgment. "I always sit here," he added as an afterthought. His wife nodded, her pearls catching the cabin lights, her lips pressed tight, eyes trained on Monica with unspoken certainty. She leaned back, clearly relishing the assumption that this young black woman could not belong. Monica's jaw tightened imperceptibly. She breathed slow. Nothing on her face betrayed the storm inside. Claire, the attendant, approached, placing a clipboard lightly on her arm, voice courteous but measured. "Ma'am, is there an issue with your seat?" Monica lifted her eyes calmly. "No issue," she said, "except that this is assigned to me." She handed the boarding pass. Claire studied it, tilted it to the light, her brow furrowing slightly as she read the digital confirmation. The man in the seat shifted, clearing his throat. He reached toward her with a forced smile. "Perhaps you'd like another seat? We have other window options." His words were calm, but the challenge in them was clear. They assumed compliance. They assumed fear. Monica's eyes never wavered. "I will remain in this seat," she said, her tone flat, precise. The cabin quieted. A faint murmur among the passengers, a shifting of shoulders, but no one interrupted. The storm had only just begun. The man leaned back, almost smug, his hands spreading across the armrests as if to occupy more space than permitted. "Do you understand the convenience we provide for loyal passengers?" he asked, voice rising slightly, a subtle accusation hidden in his calm delivery. Monica tilted her head, letting the silence stretch, letting the hum of the auxiliary power and the soft hiss of the air conditioning punctuate the tension. She observed the crew's faces, their nervous glances, the careful politeness masking unease. She catalogued every detail: eye contact, posture, hesitation, micro-expressions. All of it would be remembered. All of it would matter. The man's wife adjusted herself in her seat, the creak of leather the only sound she made. She whispered something to him, a phrase meant to assert dominance, invisible to all except Monica. Claire stepped forward again, clipboard tapping lightly against her hip. "Sir, ma'am, perhaps we can resolve this," Monica interrupted, voice calm but carrying weight. "This is my confirmed seat. Please direct any questions or concerns to the flight manifest. I will not move." The words landed like a verdict. The man's smirk faltered. A flicker of confusion crossed his face. He had assumed control, assumed she would yield. He had miscalculated. The pilot's voice then came over the intercom, professional, clipped, unaware of the drama unfolding. "Ladies and gentlemen, welcome aboard Flight Harper 722 to Los Angeles. Flight time approximately 5 hours and 10 minutes. Monica did not react. She stayed poised. Every breath, every movement controlled, measured. The cabin had become a stage. She, the observer, the underestimated, held the authority that none of them could perceive. For now. A minute later, the man's hand reached subtly for his phone, texting under the seat, his eyes darting toward Monica. Claire noticed, frowning, sensing the potential escalation. The man whispered to his wife, "We can make this right. Perhaps you'll see reason if we offer." Monica's gaze caught his, cold, unflinching. She leaned slightly forward in her seat, marking the page in the book she had pulled from her tote. Every microsecond was a lesson in restraint, in anticipation, in silent strategy. Then Monica stood, slow, deliberate. The camera of the cabin, passenger eyes, attentive but powerless, tracking her every movement. She removed her tote, adjusted the hoodie, and in one motion revealed the platinum executive badge clipped inside. Claire gasped, stepping back. The man's face drained of color, disbelief evident. "Monica Harper," she said, her voice measured, resonant. "CEO, Harper Holdings, owner of this aircraft." The revelation landed, a physical weight, knocking assumptions flat. The cabin air changed. Every glance, every whisper, every subtle smirk was replaced by shock and comprehension. She was the authority. She had always been. The man's wife clutched the armrests, her mouth open. Claire trembled slightly. Monica remained calm, returning the badge to her tote, voice steady. "Flight control is mine. The cabin is secure. Continue preparations as directed." The hum of the auxiliary power was no longer tense. Passengers shifted, adjusting to the new hierarchy. The storm had passed, but its lesson was etched into every eye, every mind. Authority had been revealed. Misjudgment punished. The underestimated now reigned. Monica sat back, sliding into the plush leather seat 1A, her book in hand. She exhaled softly, the soft hiss of air conditioning blending with the distant rumble of engines. The storm of arrogance had dissipated, replaced by quiet order. Outside, the sun reflected off the tarmac, glinting over the waiting SUVs that had brought the backup crew, the tangible symbol of consequences. Inside, the first-class cabin had become a testament. Respect is never assumed. It is earned, enforced, and recognized, even at 30,000 feet. The plane began to taxi. Monica Harper looked out the window. Below, assumptions lay shattered. Above, the sky awaited, vast, calm, and unassailable. The flight attendant's voice cut through the cabin like a whip. Ma'am, you need to move. This seat is reserved for our VIP passenger. Monica Harper didn't flinch. She remained in seat 1A, eyes calm, posture measured, as though anchored to the leather beneath her. The hum of the engines was low but steady, a mechanical heartbeat beneath the tension. She glanced toward the woman who had issued the command, Helen Chambers, mid-40s, meticulously styled blonde hair, designer suit. Helen's lips pressed thin, her eyes flicking between Monica's badge and the boarding pass in her hand. Disbelief in the way she gripped the clipboard. Passengers shifted in their seats, a collective intake of breath, the quiet symphony of unease filling the cabin. A tall man in row 2, silver-haired and sharply dressed, murmured to his companion, "Is she really going to stay?" His words, intended as gossip, reached Monica, but she didn't respond. She watched, catalogued, noting how Helen's jaw tightened, how her knuckles whitened against the paper, how a slight twitch in her left eye betrayed the beginning of panic. "Ma'am," Helen said again, voice firmer now, "I'm asking you. Please move to the aft cabin. It's just standard procedure." Monica's lips curved in a minimal, precise smile. "I understand," she said, her tone flat, but carrying an unshakable weight. "But this seat is assigned to me. There is no procedure that supersedes the manifest." She let her gaze sweep the cabin. Phones were subtly raised, passengers whispering, some nudging each other. Monica didn't flinch, didn't shift. She was a pillar. Helen's hand shook as she held the manifest. "You don't understand," she said, trying to regain control. "This passenger, our VIP, has a long-standing preference for this seat. You're causing a disruption." Monica leaned back slightly, one finger marking the page of her book, eyes locking with Helen's. "Disruption," she echoed softly. "If I am disruption, it is because assumptions were made about me. If the seat is truly reserved, show me the official confirmation." Helen's breath hitched. She glanced toward the cabin, noting the stairs, the subtle recording cameras popping out from tablet cases, smartphones tilted at angles that would capture every moment. The pressure mounted. Helen's voice faltered, her authority crumbling under the gaze of the passengers, who had begun to sense that something was deeply amiss. Monica leaned forward just slightly, producing the platinum Harper Holdings executive badge, the holographic edges catching the cabin light. "This confirms my authority," she said, voice quiet, precise. The subtle click of the plastic badge against her palm punctuated the moment. Helen's fingers froze, the clipboard slipping slightly, her knuckles whitening as the reality hit. The man across the aisle blinked, stunned, as if a film camera had cut to slow motion. You own this plane?" Helen's voice faltered, disbelief breaking through her training. Monica nodded once, her expression neutral, composed. "I do, and I am seated in my assigned seat. You will not remove me." The cabin seemed to exhale collectively, the tension shifting. Passengers straightened, whispering to each other, recording every flicker of Helen's shock. Monica's gaze swept slowly across the crew. The young attendant, Claire Benson, trembling slightly, her hands twisting the hem of her uniform, eyes wide, as if seeing the world tilt. She had followed procedure, answered questions, maintained a polite mask, but now the reality was undeniable. Monica Harper was the authority, and everything that had been built on assumptions of privilege and entitlement began to crumble. The man in row 2, whose smug smirk had anchored his sense of superiority, froze mid-sip of champagne. The older couple behind him leaned forward, murmurs of astonishment crossing their lips. Monica's calm, measured presence transformed the cabin into a courtroom. Every glance, every whisper, every shuffling of papers became evidence of a cultural misjudgment, a microcosm of society's misplaced hierarchies. Helen backed away slightly, her composure unraveling, as Monica's words cut through the hum of the air conditioning. The seat is mine, as confirmed by the manifest. Your VIP passenger's preference does not supersede reality. Show respect for the manifest and for truth, or this flight cannot continue until the matter is resolved. The silence that followed was almost tactile. Engines thrummed softly, the subtle vibration under the cabin floor echoing in tense pulses. Monica's heartbeat was steady, her breathing measured. She had anticipated every move, every hesitation, every attempt to assert false authority. The passengers leaned in, collectively holding their breath. No one spoke. The cabin had transformed from a quiet luxury space into a stage, the drama unfolding in real time. Helen glanced toward the cockpit, as though calling for backup. The captain's voice came over the intercom, calm, professional, unaware of the personal confrontation. "Cabin crew, prepare for departure. All passengers seated." Monica didn't flinch. She knew the captain's instructions were procedural, not punitive, and the truth of her ownership and authority eclipsed any generic command. Monica leaned back slightly, letting her posture radiate quiet confidence. "I am seated. I am compliant with all regulations. This is not a request. This is the truth. Treat it accordingly." The words were measured, carrying more weight than any raised voice. Claire's fingers twitched, her loyalty torn between following procedure and recognizing reality. Helen's face had drained of color, her earlier certainty replaced by disbelief, fear, and a creeping understanding of error. Monica Harper slid back into the seat, adjusted her book, and exhaled softly. The cabin had shifted. The subtle hierarchy had collapsed. The presumed authority of entitlement had been overturned by quiet, undeniable fact. The engines hummed. The air conditioning whispered. Outside, the sunlight reflected off the tarmac, glinting on the waiting SUVs and ground crew, a silent testament to consequences and preparation. The stage was set. The storm had only just begun. The cabin was still, the air thick with tension. Monica Harper sat in her seat, book in hand, eyes calm but scanning. She noted every glance, every hesitation, every tightened jaw of the passengers around her. Across the aisle, Richard Dalton, a 58-year-old financier with meticulously combed grey hair and a navy suit, tapped his fingers against the armrest, his expression oscillating between disbelief and thinly veiled annoyance. He had assumed this flight would be uneventful, a smooth commute in first class. But now the equilibrium had shattered. Helen Chambers hovered near Monica, clipboard clutched tightly, her polished nails tapping impatiently. "Ma'am," she said, voice tight. "Perhaps you don't understand. This passenger is a frequent flyer. He always sits here. It's policy." Monica's gaze didn't waver. She marked the page in her book, let the silence stretch. "Policy," she repeated softly, her tone neutral but cutting. "Policy does not override manifest, evidence, or fact. My seat is assigned to me." Richard Dalton leaned forward, voice low but carrying. "Do you realize who you're talking to?" Monica finally lifted her eyes, meeting his directly. Calm, unwavering, her expression a study in controlled authority. "I do, and I understand precisely the limits of your influence on this aircraft. This seat is mine. End of discussion." A few passengers stirred, whispering, phones peeking out to capture the drama. Some faces showed shock, others, satisfaction at the unfolding confrontation. Monica observed them all, noting micro-expressions, small gestures, a knuckle pressed against a thigh, a subtle lean forward, a half grimace, a hesitant glance to the cabin crew. She catalogued everything. Each move mattered, each reaction a clue to the psychology of entitlement. Claire Benson, the junior flight attendant, wrung her hands slightly, caught between protocol and the undeniable presence of Monica Harper's authority. "Ma'am," she whispered, leaning in slightly. Should I contact the captain? Monica shook her head subtly, a tiny gesture, measured, precise. Not yet. Observe. Do not act unless instructed. Let the situation reveal itself. Richard Dalton's lips pressed into a thin line, annoyance and disbelief flashing across his face. He leaned back in his seat, crossing his arms, trying to assert dominance through posture alone. Helen's voice rose, sharper now, more insistent. This is unprecedented. We cannot have this level of disruption in first class. You're causing a scene. I'm requesting— Monica Harper held up her hand, stopping her mid-sentence. A scene is not being caused by truth or rightful authority. It is being attempted by assumptions, prejudice, and entitlement. The cabin shifted subtly. Some passengers murmured, quietly impressed. Phones were raised, cameras tilted. The quiet authority in Monica's voice carried weight, more than any command by Helen could. Helen's hands tightened on the clipboard. You can't just defy crew instructions. The captain— Monica interrupted, voice cold, deliberate. The captain's role is to enforce safety and regulation. He is not aware of the assumptions you are making, nor the false claims of priority. My position as passenger, confirmed by manifest, is protected under FAA guidelines. Claire's eyes widened, catching the significance. The subtle authority Monica radiated was undeniable. This wasn't just a passenger. This was someone whose presence, whose judgment, superseded the petty hierarchy Helen had attempted to enforce. The tension in the cabin escalated, the air almost crackling. Every passenger sensed the unspoken power dynamics, the misjudgment, the potential for reversal. Richard Dalton opened his mouth, then closed it, realizing his bluff had been seen through. Helen, face flushed, voice tight, glanced toward the cockpit. We'll have to call security if you— Monica's gaze locked with hers, precise, unwavering. You may call anyone you wish. I am fully compliant, fully authorized, and fully aware of my rights and obligations. Any action taken outside these boundaries will be noted, documented, and addressed appropriately. Helen faltered, the clipboard slipping slightly in her hands. Richard Dalton's shoulders slumped imperceptibly. Claire's fingers twitched at the edge of the service card, caught between compliance and the recognition of undeniable authority. Monica leaned back slightly, closing her book, fingers resting lightly on the page. Calm, collected, a silent storm contained. The hum of the engines, the faint hiss of air conditioning, the distant murmur of passengers shifted into focus. Monica's breathing remained steady, almost imperceptible, but each inhale and exhale seemed to carry the weight of consequence. The entire cabin had transformed, a stage where assumptions had been tested, where the underestimated had revealed power, where entitlement was measured and found wanting. In that moment, Monica Harper's identity, CEO of Harper Holdings, owner of the aircraft, architect of the journey, was an unspoken force pressing against every corner of the cabin. She did not shout. She did not raise her voice. She simply existed in a state of absolute authority. And in that stillness, all who had underestimated her began to understand that the rules they thought they controlled had always been hers to define. The door to the cockpit opened briefly as the captain checked instruments, unaware of the internal confrontation. Monica did not flinch. Her eyes followed the subtle movements of passengers, crew, and VIPs alike. Every flicker of doubt, every hesitation, every shift in posture confirmed her control. The plane was not yet airborne, but the social gravity in the cabin had irreversibly shifted. Monica Harper exhaled softly, letting her presence settle into the leather seat, the book in hand, the badge concealed but known. The engines thrummed, the cabin quieted, and the hum of authority, the quiet, unstoppable force of truth and ownership, resonated throughout first class. The story was far from over, but the first victory, the revelation of real power in the face of assumptions, had been claimed. The cabin settled into a tense quiet, but the air was thick with anticipation. Monica Harper remained poised, the leather seat beneath her absorbing the weight of her calm authority. Across the aisle, Richard Dalton shifted again, a nervous twitch in his jaw betraying his growing realization. His wife, Eleanor, adjusted her pearl necklace, eyes wide with disbelief, fingers curling into the armrest. The smug certainty they had carried onto the plane was crumbling, replaced by the cold recognition of misjudgment. Helen Chambers, still gripping her clipboard, swallowed hard, her polished nails tapping an erratic rhythm as she tried to regain control. She leaned closer to Richard, whispering words meant to reassure, to assert dominance. "We can make this right. Just move her to another seat. This is simple." Her voice trembled slightly, despite the attempt at authority. Richard glanced at her, then at Monica, and felt the unsteady certainty in his hands slip. Monica lifted her hand slightly, not aggressively, but with the subtle precision of someone who had mastered attention. Her voice, quiet but deliberate, carried across the first-class cabin. "This seat is assigned to me. The manifest confirms it. Any further insistence on displacement will be documented and addressed through proper channels." She paused, letting the words settle, the authority in her tone resonating beyond the physical boundaries of the cabin. The subtle click of her executive badge against her tote punctuated the moment, an unspoken confirmation of her power. Claire Benson, the junior flight attendant, exhaled slowly, her fingers twisting the hem of her uniform. She had followed procedure, maintained polite composure, but now her eyes reflected recognition and awe. The woman in seat 1A was not just another passenger. She was a force that could not be dismissed, a reality that shifted the hierarchy in the cabin. Every subtle movement Monica made, the calm inflection in her speech, communicated more than any argument could. Richard Dalton straightened, trying to reclaim dominance with posture and gesture, but Monica's gaze held him. He could not retreat without acknowledgement of error, nor could he advance without exposing weakness. His wife whispered something low, a desperate suggestion to diffuse the situation. Monica did not respond. Her eyes scanned the cabin, noting micro-expressions, fleeting glances, hesitant gestures, every nuance recorded in her mind. Helen's lips pressed tight. She glanced toward the cockpit, weighing the option of escalation. "Captain might have to intervene if this continues," she muttered, more to herself than anyone else. Monica's attention flicked subtly toward the cockpit door. She could hear the faint click as the captain moved inside, adjusting dials, unaware of the confrontation unfolding just rows away. Monica remained seated, body poised, breathing steady, a calm nucleus in a storm of assumptions. The man across the aisle shifted again, muttering to himself, checking his watch, trying to measure time as leverage. But Monica Harper's presence nullified every tactic. She had anticipated the microaggressions, the silent judgments, the half-whispered suggestions, and had positioned herself not just physically, but strategically to control the narrative. The cabin was quiet but charged. Every passenger sensed the subtle shift of authority, the unspoken hierarchy now realigned. Claire stepped closer, voice barely above a whisper. "Ma'am, do you want me to—" Monica shook her head ever so slightly, a single, measured movement. "Observe. Let it play out. Do not act unless necessary." The words carried weight, the precision of someone who understood both human behavior and organizational power. The young attendant's hands twitched, caught between procedure and recognition of undeniable authority. Monica exhaled softly, sliding her book slightly on her lap, fingers brushing the page with deliberate calm. Outside, sunlight struck the tarmac, reflecting across polished surfaces, glinting off the waiting vehicles of her ground crew. The cabin was her arena. Every flutter of breath, every shift in posture, every hesitant glance at a phone camera recorded a revelation, Assumptions about power, privilege, and entitlement could be overturned not with force, but with presence, preparation, and undeniable authority. Helen Chambers finally straightened, eyes wide, her voice caught somewhere between reprimand and disbelief. You own this aircraft." Monica's calm nod was enough. The subtle hum of engines, the hiss of air conditioning, and the faint click of seatbelts became a backdrop to a silent, irreversible victory. The cabin had transformed from a place of tension and hierarchy into a testament to the consequences of misjudgment, the authority of truth, and the power of quiet, controlled command. Passengers shifted uneasily in their seats, whispers spreading like ripples through water. Phones were subtly lifted to record, to capture every glance, every word, every flicker of reaction. Monica Harper did not move. She did not speak further. She simply sat, a silent demonstration of control, a reminder that misjudgment of character would not go unchallenged. Outside, the ground crew waited, ready to execute any logistical needs for the flight. Inside, the first-class cabin had recalibrated. Entitlement, assumption, and bias had met the cold precision of authority. Monica Harper, seated in her rightful position, had not raised her voice, had not demanded theatrics, yet she had established undeniable dominance. The engines hummed. The flight would continue. The lesson had been delivered. Respect had been restored. The cabin remained tense, the hum of the auxiliary power and the faint hiss of the ventilation system filling the space with a steady undertone. Monica Harper's eyes scanned the rows of passengers with deliberate calm. Every subtle twitch, every slight shift in posture, every murmured word registered in her mind like a series of data points. The man across the aisle, Richard Dalton, 58, his silver hair immaculately combed, tugged at his tie nervously. His wife, Eleanor, clutched her silk scarf, her eyes darting between Monica and the flight attendant, trying to make sense of the situation. They had expected compliance, the quiet yielding of an unassuming passenger. They had underestimated her. Helen Chambers, mid-40s, the flight attendant who had issued the original command, adjusted her clipboard in a nervous grip. Her smile was strained, a veneer that barely masked the panic creeping into her expression. "Ma'am, I don't think you understand. This is standard procedure. The VIP passenger has a long-standing preference for this seat," she said, voice tight, trying to assert control. Monica's eyes did not flicker. She marked her place in the worn paperback she held and let the silence stretch, heavy, deliberate. "Procedure does not override the manifest. My seat is assigned to me," she said, measured, each word slicing through the tension in the cabin. A murmur rippled quietly among passengers. Some discreetly reached for their phones, recording the confrontation. Others leaned forward slightly, sensing the imbalance of authority in the room. Monica noted every expression, the tightening of jaws, the blink of an eye, the half-turned heads. Each micro-gesture confirmed the assumptions of entitlement and the weight of misjudgment. Claire Benson, the junior flight attendant, stood frozen, fingers twisting the hem of her uniform, caught between the instinct to obey protocol and the undeniable reality of Monica's presence. Richard Dalton leaned forward, trying to reassert control with a carefully measured gesture, as if posture alone could reclaim dominance. Monica's gaze met his, unwavering, the cool precision of her presence cutting through his confidence. "I am seated. This is my assigned seat. The manifest confirms it. Any further insistence on displacement will be documented and addressed appropriately," she said. The words landed in the cabin with quiet force, a declaration of authority that no one could ignore. Helen's hands tightened on the clipboard. She glanced toward the cockpit, a subtle plea for intervention, but the captain's voice, calm and procedural over the intercom, did not address the social tension. "Cabin crew, prepare for departure. All passengers seated." Monica remained seated, her body radiating calm and control. Her authority was not derived from volume or aggression, but from presence, clarity, and the certainty of fact. The man's wife whispered something, her voice carrying just enough to be caught by Monica's peripheral awareness. Monica's lips curved slightly, not in humor, but in acknowledgement of the attempt to manipulate the situation. She leaned back, keeping her posture composed, eyes slowly scanning the cabin, taking in the quiet documentation of power shifts. Phones tilted, passengers whispering, subtle glances to the crew. The social dynamics had shifted irreversibly. Claire Benson took a cautious step closer, voice low. "Ma'am, should I call the captain?" Monica shook her head, a small, controlled motion. "Observe. Let the situation unfold. Act only if necessary." Claire's hands twitched, caught between instinctive compliance and recognition of the real authority present in the cabin. The young attendant realized the stakes. This was no ordinary passenger, and every move mattered. Monica exhaled, the faint rustle of her book the only sound she allowed to punctuate the cabin's charged silence. Outside the plane, sunlight glinted on the tarmac, reflecting off the waiting vehicles and ground crew, a subtle reminder that consequence was immediate and precise. Inside, the first-class cabin had become a stage. Every breath, every shift in posture, every whispered word recorded in memory as evidence of assumption, entitlement, and error. Helen Chambers finally straightened, voice faltering, disbelief cracking through her carefully maintained authority. You own this aircraft!" Monica's nod was almost imperceptible, yet absolute. She did not raise her voice. She did not gesture. The engines hummed beneath them, air conditioning whispered, and the silent assertion of power was complete. Claire's hands relaxed slightly, her awe evident. The cabin had shifted. The presumed authority of entitlement had been eclipsed by undeniable fact. Monica Harper leaned back, adjusting her tote beside her, the book open in her lap. The engine's vibration under the cabin floor was a constant rhythm, grounding the moment. Every passenger, every crew member, every VIP had registered the revelation. Authority had been asserted without a word of shouting, without confrontation beyond truth. The lesson was clear. Assumptions based on appearance, status, or privilege were fragile. Facts and rightful authority could dismantle them, even 30,000 feet in the air. The silence in the cabin was electric, almost tactile. Monica Harper sat perfectly still, the leather of seat 1A absorbing her quiet authority. Every small movement, every flicker of doubt in Helen Chambers' eyes, every subtle shift in posture from Richard Dalton and Eleanor was catalogued. Monica's mind worked in layers, observing, calculating, absorbing the tension, reading micro-expressions as if the cabin itself were a living organism. The soft hum of the engines beneath them was a constant undercurrent, a reminder that, despite the drama, the world outside continued with indifferent precision. Helen tried again, her voice firmer now, threading authority and desperation. "Man, if you refuse to move, I will have to escalate." "The captain," Monica interrupted, her tone flat, cutting, precise. "The captain is here to ensure safety and adherence to aviation regulations. My seat is assigned to me. The manifest confirms it. Any escalation without cause will be documented and addressed. This is not a request." Her eyes swept the cabin slowly, letting the weight of her statement settle into every corner. Passengers shifted, whispers rising, phones tilting for recording. The authority that had been invisible moments ago was now undeniable. Richard Dalton straightened aggressively, attempting to reassert control through posture and subtle gestures. Monica's gaze held him, a quiet, immovable force. She leaned slightly forward, fingers brushing the page of her book, voice measured yet sharp. Displacement based on assumption, preference, or prejudice is not procedure. It is error. Correct it, or accept the consequences of acting outside authority. The cabin held its collective breath. The engine's hum seemed to pulse in rhythm with the rising tension. Every observer, passenger, attendant, even the discreet crew, felt the shift in gravity. Monica was not simply defending a seat. She was asserting undeniable institutional authority. Claire Benson, the junior attendant, shifted on her feet, caught between protocol and awe. Her fingers twitched, the subtle nervous gesture betraying the conflict in her mind. She had followed procedure meticulously, answered questions, maintained politeness. But now the rules of engagement had shifted. Monica's presence redefined authority. Every glance Monica allowed, every subtle breath she drew, communicated power and expectation. Claire's loyalty wavered, recalibrating to the undeniable truth before her. Helen's knuckles whitened around her clipboard. She glanced toward the cockpit, considering intervention, but the pilot's measured voice over the intercom remained procedural, unaware of the confrontation. "Cabin crew, prepare for departure. All passengers seated." Monica did not move. Her posture radiated calm control, unassailable, precise. Her authority derived not from volume or force, but from truth, preparation, and presence. Every assumption held by Helen, Richard, Eleanor, or the surrounding passengers had begun to crumble under the weight of fact. Richard Dalton attempted a whispered negotiation to his wife, a low murmur of influence meant to sway Monica. She caught it with a slight tilt of the head, acknowledging the attempt without breaking her composure. Every micro moment, the twitch of a jaw, a shift in seating, a tightening of a hand, was recorded by her mind. She had anticipated every reaction, every microaggression, every silent challenge. The cabin, once a space of controlled luxury, had become an arena for testing assumptions and authority. Monica reached subtly into her tote, revealing the platinum-edged Harper Holdings executive badge. The holographic surface caught the cabin lights, reflecting a quiet, almost cinematic shimmer across the rows. Claire gasped audibly, stepping back slightly, eyes wide. Richard Dalton's mouth went dry. Eleanor's hands tightened around her scarf. Helen's clipboard dropped a fraction, her authority visibly cracking. Monica held the badge up just enough for the significance to register without theatrics. "This confirms my authority. I am seated in my rightful position." Her words, calm and deliberate, were a scalpel cutting through the arrogance and assumptions that had defined the cabin moments before. The cabin air shifted. Passengers adjusted uneasily, whispering. Phones tilted, capturing every flicker of recognition and disbelief. The hum of engines and air conditioning became the backdrop to a tableau of authority, error, and revelation. Helen's composure collapsed entirely, her voice tight, breath caught. You own this plane?" Monica's nod was slight, precise, irrefutable. The microcosm of entitlement, the invisible hierarchy of assumptions, had been undone in a single, deliberate moment. Claire Benson exhaled softly, fingers relaxing, the first sign of understanding and alignment. Monica's calm presence had not only reclaimed her rightful seat, it had realigned the social and procedural order in the cabin. Every passenger, crew member, and VIP understood that assumptions, entitlement, and prejudice were fragile in the face of prepared, undeniable authority. The plane hummed gently beneath them, a steady heartbeat to a quiet but profound victory. The storm of misjudgment had been contained, and control now resided squarely in Monica Harper's hands. Passengers settled slightly, whispering among themselves, recording, adjusting. Monica leaned back, book in lap, badge tucked away, posture perfect. The engine's vibration under the cabin floor was steady, grounding the moment. Every subtle glance, every hesitant whisper, every micro-expression of surprise or awe became a testament. Authority, truth, and calm decisiveness could overturn assumptions, even in the most tense, hierarchical, and high-stakes environment. Monica Harper had claimed victory, quietly, completely, without a single shout. The stage was hers. The cabin remained suspended in a tense quiet, the soft mechanical hum of the engines mingling with the distant hiss of the air conditioning, filling every corner with a low, vibrating pulse. Monica Harper sat upright in seat 1A, hands resting lightly on her book, eyes alert but serene. Every shift, every glance, every subtle expression in the cabin was catalogued in her mind. The tightening of Helen Chambers' jaw, the nervous adjustment of Richard Dalton's tie, the tentative glance of Eleanor Dalton toward her husband. The assumptions, the entitlement, the invisible hierarchies, they all rippled through the cabin, waiting to be dismantled. Helen's face had gone pale, lips pressed tight. She clutched her clipboard like a lifeline, tapping lightly with the edge of her fingernail, trying to maintain a semblance of authority. "Ma'am, I'm asking you again," she said, voice tight, controlled. "Please move to the aft cabin. We cannot have this situation persist." Monica's eyes lifted slowly, meeting Helen's with a still, calculated stare. "Persist," she echoed, voice low, calm, deliberate. What is persisting is assumption masquerading as authority. This seat is assigned to me. The manifest confirms it. Any escalation without cause will be recorded and addressed. Her words were measured, each one landing like a deliberate strike, reverberating through the cabin. The passengers shifted subtly, whispers rising, phones tilting discreetly, as if sensing the gravity of the moment. Some leaned forward, straining to catch every word, to witness the unfolding of a confrontation that was simultaneously ordinary and extraordinary. Claire Benson, the junior flight attendant, wrung her hands nervously, the hem of her uniform twisting under her fingers. She had adhered to protocol, maintained professionalism, but now her understanding of authority and power was being challenged in real time. She saw the subtle power Monica exerted, quiet, controlled, undeniable. Richard Dalton's smug composure faltered. His hands tightened around the armrests, fingers curling. Yet his eyes betrayed doubt, a flicker of recognition that his assumptions had been flawed. Eleanor Dalton leaned forward slightly, whispering to him, trying to salvage a sense of control. Monica caught the words, a slight tilt of her head acknowledging the attempt, without acknowledgement of authority, letting the silence grow heavy, deliberate. Every subtle movement, every micro-expression in the cabin, Monica absorbed, noting the unspoken recalibration of hierarchy. Helen's knuckles whitened, and she glanced briefly toward the cockpit. The pilot's voice over the intercom remained calm, routine, oblivious to the human dynamics in the cabin. "Cabin crew, prepare for departure. All passengers seated." Monica remained seated, posture perfect, her presence asserting authority without volume. It was a quiet, inexorable force. Every assumption held by Helen, Richard, Eleanor, or even the surrounding passengers began to unravel. Monica subtly reached into her tote, producing the platinum-edged Harper Holdings executive badge. The holographic surface caught the light, glinting across the polished cabin. Claire's eyes widened. Her breath caught slightly as she realized the truth. Helen's clipboard slipped slightly in her grip, the veneer of control cracking. The Daltons froze, their previous confidence evaporating under the silent power radiating from Monica. "This confirms my authority," she said quietly, almost ceremoniously. "I am seated in my rightful position." The cabin collectively held its breath. Phones rose, recording, capturing, streaming the moment in ways the crew had not anticipated. The subtle vibrations of the engines underfoot became a quiet underscore to the transformation occurring in the room. The assumed power of entitlement, the invisible hierarchy of social privilege, had been overturned in a single, deliberate, quiet gesture. Monica's presence alone had redefined the space, shifting authority and expectation in ways no argument or demand could have. Richard Dalton's lips parted, then closed. His posture stiffened, the smirk fading into confusion and dawning realization. Eleanor Dalton's hands tightened around her scarf, her eyes wide, realizing that their assumptions had misread reality. Helen Chambers faltered entirely, voice trembling slightly. You own this aircraft?" Monica's nod was slight, controlled, precise. No further explanation was needed. The reality of her ownership, of her authority, had reshaped the social dynamics of the cabin. Claire Benson exhaled, her fingers relaxing as comprehension set in. The subtle authority Monica had demonstrated, the calm yet undeniable presence, shifted the cabin into quiet order. Every passenger, crew member, and observer understood, without a word shouted, that entitlement, prejudice, and assumptions had consequences. Monica leaned back slightly, book open in her lap, posture immaculate. Engines hummed, air conditioning whispered. The atmosphere in the cabin now composed, controlled, and aligned with truth and rightful authority. The first-class cabin had become a microcosm of a larger societal lesson. Assumptions of power are fragile. Authority, truth, and preparation are absolute. Monica Harper, seated calmly, had reclaimed not only her seat, but the hierarchy itself. Every eye, every whisper, every subtle gesture had witnessed the undeniable display of competence and rightful command. The plane prepared for takeoff, and in the cabin, a quiet equilibrium reigned, a testament to authority recognized, misjudgment punished, and respect re-established. The tension in the cabin had not dissipated, though it had shifted. Monica Harper remained seated in seat 1A, a pillar of quiet authority. Her gaze swept the cabin, absorbing every detail. The shifting weight of passengers, the tightening of hands on armrests, the nervous glances of the crew. Each movement, each hesitation, each micro-expression was a note in the symphony of power dynamics unfolding around her. The engines thrummed softly beneath, a low, constant reminder that despite the human drama, the plane would obey physics before it obeyed prejudice. Helen Chambers, still gripping her clipboard, leaned toward Richard Dalton, whispering rapidly. Her voice trembled, a mix of disbelief and fear. I don't know how to handle this. She's the owner. She's seated here legally, and we can't move her." Richard Dalton's jaw tightened. His entitlement, so confidently wielded, had been dismantled in a heartbeat. He looked at Monica, searching for a flaw, a crack in composure, but found none. Every micro-gesture, the tilt of her head, the calmness in her breathing, the unflinching stare, exuded control. Claire Benson, the junior flight attendant, adjusted the edge of her uniform nervously. Her fingers flexed slightly, caught between instinctive obedience and the undeniable reality of authority. She'd followed protocol, answered questions politely, and maintained composure. Yet she now realized that the hierarchy she believed in was overturned. Monica's quiet strength recalibrated everything in the cabin, and the young attendant felt both awe and relief. Monica's hand rested lightly on the page of her book, her eyes scanning subtly over the cabin. She allowed herself a slow exhale, the kind that carries weight without sound. She observed the passengers, each reaction catalogued. The older couple in row 3 leaned slightly forward, their whispered comments barely audible, but clear in intent. Recognition of a misjudgment, the dawning comprehension that assumptions had been wrong. The subtle shift of social gravity in the cabin was palpable. Richard Dalton finally spoke, his voice tight, measured, almost tentative. You can't just..." Monica's gaze met his, steady, piercing. "I can, and I am. Every action I take here is within my authority. Any further challenge to that authority is an error of judgment on your part, not mine." The words struck the cabin like a quiet thunderclap. The murmurs among passengers grew louder, though still restrained, as phones were suddenly raised, recording the unfolding truth. Helen's hands trembled around her clipboard. She glanced toward the cockpit, searching for guidance, but the pilot's voice over the intercom remained neutral, oblivious to the human conflict playing out just a few rows below. "Cabin crew, prepare for departure. All passengers seated." Monica did not move, did not signal, did not flinch. She was immovable, her authority absolute. Every assumption, every expectation of compliance had been shattered. Claire Benson exhaled slowly, almost imperceptibly, and relaxed her grip. She realized that her role was no longer simply enforcing procedure blindly. Observing Monica, she understood the power of calm, prepared authority, and the weight it carried over assumptions and prejudice. Her eyes flicked to the other crew members, noting their tension, their uncertainty, and the quiet acknowledgement that Monica Harper commanded the cabin, without raising her voice. Monica leaned back slightly in her seat, fingers lightly resting on her book. The subtle reflection of sunlight off the polished metal surfaces of the cabin mirrored the new hierarchy. The Daltons shifted uncomfortably in their seats, their previous confidence replaced by silent comprehension. Helen Chambers exhaled, shoulders slumping, as the authority she had assumed to wield dissolved before her. The engines hummed steadily, the soft vibrations beneath the floor grounding the cabin in mechanical certainty. Outside, the sun reflected off the tarmac, catching the waiting ground crew and vehicles, a silent reminder of consequences, preparedness, and authority. Inside, the first-class cabin had transformed into a tableau of social recalibration. Assumptions dismantled, privilege confronted, respect enforced. Monica Harper's presence had done more than reclaim a seat. It had rewritten the unspoken social contracts in the cabin. Every whisper, every glance, every subtle gesture had witnessed the undeniable authority of a person underestimated. The plane began to taxi, engines humming, and in the quiet, measured composure of Monica Harper, the lesson was clear. True authority is earned, recognized, and undeniable. The plane moved slowly along the taxiway, the low roar of the engines blending with the soft hum of the cabin's ventilation system. Monica Harper remained in seat 1A, her body relaxed yet taut with controlled presence, every micro-movement deliberate. The book in her lap rested untouched, her fingers brushing lightly over the edge of the page, eyes scanning the cabin with calculated awareness. Every passenger, every crew member, every shadow of doubt was noted. Every twitch, every subtle intake of breath, recorded in the mental ledger she had been compiling since stepping onto the jet bridge. Richard Dalton, across the aisle, shifted in his seat, the stiffness in his shoulders betraying his growing unease. His wife Eleanor leaned forward slightly, her hand pressing on the armrest, eyes wide, voice caught between disbelief and silent apology for the assumption they had carried so confidently. Monica's gaze met his for a moment, calm, sharp, piercing, and he instinctively recoiled, a flicker of understanding crossing his features. He had overestimated his authority, underestimated her. Helen Chambers, gripping her clipboard so tightly her knuckles whitened, attempted to recover. Her voice, once confident and commanding, now trembled ever so slightly. "Ma'am, perhaps there's been a misunderstanding." The VIP passenger, our regular traveler, he. Monica lifted her hand just enough to halt the explanation, her eyes cool, unwavering. "Misunderstanding is not my concern. The manifest confirms my seat. Any continued insistence on displacement is an error in judgment on your part." Claire Benson, the junior flight attendant, took a hesitant step back, her fingers twisting the hem of her uniform. She had followed protocol, answered questions politely, maintained a veneer of calm professionalism. Yet now, standing in the cabin, witnessing the authority Monica projected, She felt the weight of true power. The lesson was clear. Presence, preparation, and clarity could dismantle assumptions and entitlement without a single raised voice. Monica's hand moved subtly into her tote and produced the Harper Holdings executive badge, the platinum edge glinting in the cabin lights. The holographic shimmer caught the eyes of several passengers. Claire gasped softly, the disbelief and awe flickering across her face. Richard Dalton froze mid-breath, his assumptions unraveling. Eleanor's grip on her scarf tightened, her disbelief evident. Helen Chambers faltered entirely, her composure slipping as she realized the reality she had failed to recognize. Monica's calm, precise words followed. "This confirms my authority. I am seated in my rightful position. Treat it accordingly." The cabin seemed to hold its breath. Phones were subtly raised, recording. Passengers leaned forward, whispering, astonished. The engine's hum and air conditioning hiss became the background score to the dramatic reversal of social hierarchy. Monica had not shouted, had not demanded attention, yet every subtle movement, every measured breath, conveyed unassailable control. The invisible structure of entitlement had been exposed and overturned. Richard Dalton's jaw tightened. His posture, once rigid with confidence, slumped imperceptibly. Eleanor's eyes widened, her hands loosening slightly as comprehension set in. Helen Chambers glanced at the cockpit, a fleeting hope for intervention, but the captain's voice remained neutral and procedural. Monica's authority did not rely on others' approval. She radiated control, undeniable and absolute. Claire exhaled slowly, a flicker of relief passing through her. She understood now that authority did not always arrive with loud commands. It could be subtle, precise, measured yet unshakable. Every micro-gesture in the cabin had registered Monica's dominance without the need for confrontation beyond the truth. The cabin had been recalibrated. Monica Harper leaned back slightly, settling into her seat, book in hand, posture perfect. The engine's steady vibration beneath the floor, the subtle light glinting off polished metal surfaces, and the faint hiss of the air conditioning created a quiet, cinematic tableau of restored order. The plane was taxiing toward the runway. But in that cabin, assumptions had been tested, entitlement had been confronted, and respect had been restored. Passengers and crew alike adjusted in their seats. Every whispered word, every tentative glance, every recorded gesture reinforced a single reality. Authority grounded in preparation, clarity, and truth could override presumption, bias, and entitlement, even 30,000 feet above the earth. Monica Harper had reclaimed her seat, her power, and the cabin itself. The engines surged gently as the plane approached takeoff. Outside, sunlight reflected off the tarmac and waiting ground crew, a quiet testament to consequences and the certainty of judgment. Inside, calm prevailed. The lesson had been delivered. The plane settled briefly at the end of the taxiway, engines idling low, and Monica Harper's presence remained unshaken. Every glance in the cabin seemed magnified, every micro-expression sharper under her observation. Richard Dalton's fingers drummed nervously against the armrest. Eleanor's eyes shifted repeatedly, tracing the calm, deliberate movements of Monica, as if searching for a crack. None appeared. The subtle hum of the aircraft's systems provided a constant reminder that, while the machinery obeyed predictable laws, human behavior could be unpredictable, and misjudgment costly. Helen Chambers, still clinging to her clipboard, attempted a final assertion of authority. "Ma'am, if you do not comply, I will have no choice but to involve security personnel." Monica's head tilted fractionally, eyes locking on Helen with a weightless precision that seemed to anchor the entire cabin in place. "Security," she said softly, each syllable deliberate. "There is no security concern here. What you perceive as a threat is merely your own misjudgment. Any escalation beyond protocol will reflect on you, not me." Claire Benson, standing near the galley, bit her lower lip. Uncertainty writ large on her face. She had followed procedure, but the clarity of Monica's composure rendered those procedures secondary. Claire's hands flexed, twisting slightly at the hem of her uniform, as if testing the boundaries of her understanding. The lesson was not in enforcement. It was in observation, preparation, and the authority that arose naturally from truth. Richard Dalton leaned slightly forward, voice tight, but laced with disbelief. "You can't just—" Monica's gaze met his, still, measured, sharp. "I can, and I have. This seat is assigned to me, confirmed by the manifest, and protected under the regulations governing this aircraft. Any challenge beyond this point is an error in judgment on your part." Her calm authority carved through the tension like a surgical incision. The cabin's air seemed heavier, each breath held in anticipation of the next move. Helen's grip on the clipboard slackened. Her composure faltered visibly. She glanced briefly toward the cockpit, seeking validation, yet the pilot's voice remained neutral, procedural. The power in the cabin no longer rested with her, nor with Richard or Eleanor. It resided entirely with Monica Harper. She exhaled softly, her body relaxed but controlled, allowing the silent gravity of her position to settle across the space. Monica subtly retrieved the Harper Holdings executive badge from her tote. The holographic edge caught the cabin light, flashing briefly against polished surfaces. Claire's eyes widened. Richard Dalton froze mid-gesture, the realization dawning. Eleanor clutched her scarf tighter, whispering something that died in the air. Helen Chambers' clipboard slipped slightly. Monica lifted the badge just enough for it to be visible without theatrics. "This confirms my authority," she said evenly, the cabin absorbing the weight of her words. "I am seated in my rightful position. Treat it accordingly." Passengers leaned slightly forward, murmuring. Phones lifted to capture the moment discreetly. The hum of the engines, the gentle vibration beneath the cabin floor, the subtle hiss of air circulation, all became part of the atmosphere, emphasizing the shift in dynamics. Authority had arrived, quietly but unmistakably, and it had rewritten the unspoken hierarchies in the cabin. Richard Dalton's smugness faded entirely. His posture slumped slightly, shoulders sagging under the gravity of the moment. Eleanor's fingers relaxed their tight grip on her scarf, her disbelief mingling with the dawning awareness that assumptions had been catastrophically wrong. Helen Chambers exhaled, a subtle tremor in her jaw. She had misread reality entirely. The passenger she had sought to command was, in fact, the owner of the aircraft, and her authority was now subordinate. Claire Benson's shoulders straightened, fingers unclenching, and her expression shifted from tension to awe. She understood now that authority was not always about enforcement. Sometimes it arrived quietly, carried in composure, truth, and presence. The cabin had been recalibrated, entitlement subdued, assumptions dismantled. Monica Harper leaned back slightly, book in hand, and allowed herself a measured exhale. The plane's engines surged gently as it prepared to move toward the runway. Outside, the sunlight glinted off the tarmac and ground vehicles, a reminder that consequences were precise, inevitable, and unavoidable. Inside, the cabin had been transformed. Every passenger, every crew member, every subtle gesture now reflected a new understanding. Authority, when wielded with preparation, clarity, and truth, could dismantle entitlement and reassert order. Monica Harper had reclaimed not only her seat, but the integrity of the cabin itself. The flight was now hers to command. Word count: approximately 1,000 words. The first signs of turbulence barely registered in the cabin as Monica Harper leaned back in her seat, the hum of the engines beneath her a steady, grounding presence. Her book lay open, pages held gently between her fingers. but her eyes were on the cabin, absorbing every detail. The crew moved quietly around her, a subtle choreography of efficiency, their expressions betraying the lingering unease from the confrontation earlier. Claire Benson, now steady, delivered drinks to passengers with careful precision, casting small glances toward Monica, as if seeking affirmation that the order had been restored. Monica did not acknowledge them. She allowed the air to settle, her presence alone restoring equilibrium. Across the aisle, Richard Dalton sat rigid, shoulders squared, yet the lines of tension were evident around his eyes and jaw. Eleanor clutched her scarf, fingers entwined tightly, shifting uneasily with each subtle vibration of the plane. The memory of her assumptions and the shock of Monica's revelation weighed heavily on her, pressing down like invisible hands. The subtle realization that authority had been misjudged hung between them, palpable in every small gesture. The other passengers, many of whom had been observing quietly, now relaxed slightly, though their attention remained fixed on the unfolding tension. Phones were discreetly lowered, a few capturing the remnants of the drama, but the air itself seemed to settle into respect for the woman seated in 1A. Monica's fingers brushed the edge of her book, tracing the worn spine with a calm precision that mirrored her mental focus. Every inch of her surroundings was catalogued: the subtle flinch of a hand, the hesitant glance, the minute shift in posture. She noted Claire's small adjustments as the young attendant delivered drinks to passengers in the rear rows, each movement a micro-expression of recognition and understanding. Monica exhaled slowly, almost imperceptibly, letting the calm flow through her, allowing the cabin to breathe. The engines hummed, the vibrations steady beneath the floor, a subtle reassurance that the chaos had passed. For now. The intercom clicked softly. Captain Jonathan Miles's voice carried clearly but evenly. "Ladies and gentlemen, we are beginning our climb. Please remain seated with seatbelts fastened. Cabin service will resume once we reach cruising altitude." Monica barely moved. She had anticipated every procedural announcement, every ripple of authority. Her seatbelt was secured, her posture poised, and her calm authority radiated outward, invisible yet undeniable. Across the cabin, subtle nods, whispered acknowledgements, and even a slight relaxation of tension betrayed the recognition that she had claimed control, without a word of confrontation. Richard Dalton's face was tight, a mask of controlled irritation. He leaned slightly forward, whispering to Eleanor, words she could not entirely hear, a desperate attempt to reclaim authority that had long since slipped from his grasp. Monica's eyes flicked toward them briefly, cool and observant, then returned to the book she had carefully marked. Every flicker of reaction was logged in her mind. She had endured assumptions and prejudice before. Now, the awareness of power and consequence lay before her in every subtle movement of those who had misjudged her. The flight attendants moved with renewed efficiency. Claire delivered a tray of fresh squeezed juice to a passenger near the rear, casting another fleeting glance at Monica. The young woman's composure had been strengthened by witnessing Monica's calm and deliberate assertion of authority. She understood, finally, that leadership was not about loud declarations, but the quiet, relentless presence of confidence, precision, and clarity. Monica's example had recalibrated the social dynamics of the cabin, and Claire's nervous energy had transformed into professional vigilance. The seatbelt signs dimmed, and the soft clatter of service carts moving down the aisle filled the space. Monica remained still, the book resting lightly on her lap, her gaze sweeping subtly over the passengers. Each micro-expression, each flicker of understanding or realization became evidence of a larger truth: that authority, when wielded with preparation and calm, could dismantle assumptions, entitlement, and bias without a single raised voice. The plane's gentle vibration underfoot was a constant reminder that the journey was real, the environment high stakes, and the lesson permanent. Outside the windows, the Atlantic stretched below, vast and unyielding, Clouds scattered across the horizon in a muted grey, streaked with sunlight. Monica's eyes tracked the movement, the subtle changes in light reflecting off the ocean and clouds. But her focus remained inward, cataloguing the human landscape within the cabin. Every whisper, every hesitant glance, every adjustment in posture confirmed the recalibration of authority. Even the Dortons, seated rigidly across the aisle, had begun to absorb the quiet lesson of consequence and recognition. Claire Benson paused by the galley, glancing toward Monica. Her shoulders relaxed, a subtle exhale escaping her lips, and she nodded almost imperceptibly. Monica's presence had transformed the atmosphere. What had begun as a confrontation based on assumption and entitlement had evolved into a lesson in respect, observation, and quiet command. Every passenger now understood, at some level, that authority was not always loud, not always overt, but always undeniable when rooted in preparation, clarity, and truth. The plane leveled at 35,000 feet, engines steady, cabin lights soft and even. Monica adjusted slightly, closing the book with a delicate flick of her wrist. The cabin had returned to order, yet the lessons lingered in every corner, in every gaze, in every subtle gesture. The Dortons sat silently. Claire moved efficiently, and even Helen Chambers had retreated to the rear, her authority recalibrated and humbled. The hum of the engines, the faint hiss of the ventilation, and the quiet pulse of the aircraft blended into a soft, cinematic background to a cabin transformed. Monica Harper exhaled slowly, allowing the calm to settle fully around her. Outside, the sunlight caught the wing, glinting across the tarmac below and the distant skyline ahead. Inside, the first-class cabin was serene, orderly, and aware. Assumptions had been tested, entitlement confronted, and respect re-established. The journey continued, but the social and psychological recalibration would linger far beyond this flight. Monica Harper had reclaimed her seat, her authority, and the cabin itself. Every eye, every movement, every thought had registered the lesson. True power is measured not by appearances, not by volume, but by preparation, clarity, and the calm, relentless assertion of fact. If you enjoyed this story of authority and justice, don't forget to like, subscribe, and comment 3 words.